So this is a really interesting question, and it always comes up every time. So which Firebase SDK do you choose when you're actually using React Native? It's a question that I've been battling for a while as well. Like personally, when I'm doing my own projects, and most times, like maybe like I can just simply say that. Unfortunately, it depends on the type of project that you're doing. So in this case, Jack here wrote a really interesting article. Jack is at the Firebase team at Google, so he has even more insight on it. But it just validifies what I already know. That like depending on like choosing what Firebase project to use will depend on your project and the capabilities or features that you want. But I can simply just boil it down, like simply we're just gonna talk over it. Basically you normally have like you have your React Native SDK, which is a library which has Firebase SDKs and which are native to each of the platforms that you're gonna be running on. So if you're running on iOS, it's gonna be native to iOS or Android. So here's the library itself, like the page, and it's all by a company called Invitize. So they quite good, and they managed to put this thing together, which is really great. So this is the React Native SDK. So I look at this as like the native one. So that means then you have all the native features that you might want from Firebase, and then you have the second one, which is the Firebase JavaScript SDK. So the Firebase JavaScript SDK is more for like JavaScript based apps, of which React Native is, but React Native is not the main focus of it. And you can almost see it as more of like a web first SDK for JavaScript. And then it just happens that React Native, you can use this library with React Native because React Native is running in a JavaScript environment. So this one is not really optimized for mobile apps or uses any of the native APIs. So you shouldn't expect the most performance out of it. But then like and then when do you actually use and which one do you use? So like I said, like so here he mentions that like when you're using native mobile SDKs, you should use the React Native Firebase SDKs. But what are the native SDKs that mobile SDKs you might want to do something like using crash analytics, like to see crashes within your app, more detailed analytics on different pages. You might want to do, let's say, native ads, like not just like the normal ads, native ads, which are and then get like some analytics from Firebase. You might want to go with this. You might want to use app distribution as well. The ability for you to push your app to Firebase app distribution and then allow other people to use it. You need to be using the React Native SDKs for that. And then should you use JavaScript SDK? I mean, the most obvious one is Expo. If you're using Expo and Expo um, doesn't like out of the box give you access to native modules. So that means then like if you really want just a simple dirty way to actually have Firebase running, just use the JavaScript SDK. With Expo, you can actually use the native one nowadays using the EAS custom dev client. But then like there's still some configuring that you have to do, or another way you have to use the pre-build from Expo. And if you're interested to know how that works, you can just drop a link in the description or in the comments, and then I can create a video on it. But that's what you have to do. And then also, if you are creating an app which is gonna be mobile and web, so that means that you're gonna have an app for iOS and Android and have a website as well with one code base. It's better to actually use the Firebase JavaScript SDK because it will work throughout. And then going to like the actual how does it actually work? So So for the Firebase JavaScript SDK, you just have to import a file. I'm just gonna show you an example right now. So here we have a React Native app which has Firebase installed. So what you have to do, you have to create a config file which has a Firebase config file, and then in that file you have to like just import like your normal config. I've hashed out some of these items like the API key, but you have to put all your details there. And then the next thing, you have to just export that whatever like whatever method you want. In this case, I wanted to use auth, which I'm gonna use for logging in, because you can see it's a logging in screen. You just import it in the screen that you want, and then you can simply log in with Firebase. So this is like an Expo app. You can see that it's Expo. So we're using the Expo Go client, and we're using the JavaScript SDK. And then another example I can just show you is like if now you're using like the native module for this app here. I'm using a React Native CLI. I'm not using Expo, and I'm using the Firebase React Native library. So you can see from here. So here, this one has more configuration steps that you have to do beforehand. Like for example, you have to add files in your native modules. You have to add files in your Android folder. You have to add files in your iOS folder. Files which allow your app to recognize Firebase, and it gives Firebase access to detailed items within like your app itself, so that you can use things like get like logs on crashes. So you need to actually put that in the actually have to put that in the native modules. And then after you do that, you still also have to download the JSON file from Google, which you can view as like the config file in a way, but it's not really. But yeah, so that's that, and then you can just simply like now import it here. So like say import Firebase from React Native Firebase auth, and then that article was quite handy because it showed some really good tips here. For example, like we know that like with auth you can actually just go to React Native directly to get the Firebase auth, which is really handy. So that means then like there are like React Native bundles within Firebase. So that means to avoid duplicating items, you just have to import the React Native one. But then not all methods have like a React Native bundle, but then so it's a matter of like having to check if like is React Native there or not. So that's pretty cool. So that's one, like you just pointed out, that's one of the mistakes that people make. And funny enough, that's one of the mistakes I also did on the other app. So yeah, I thought this is really cool. If you like this video and you're looking for more content on React Native, Firebase, put a like subscribe, give it a like, and I'm gonna be pushing out more content on this. Cool. Have a great one. Cheers. I'm gonna put all the links in the description for you to check as well. Cheers.